All right, welcome back, everybody. You know we love a good deep dive, and today we're tackling a topic that's, well, it's a doozy. Donald Trump.
Yeah, you guys weren't kidding when you said you had a ton of material. His legal history. I mean, wow. Trials, accusations, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, so we're going to try to untangle it all, right? Pick out the most important stuff, the stuff that really matters.
And hopefully give you guys listening a clearer picture of how it all kind of connects.
Exactly, because it can be kind of confusing, right?
It really can, yeah.
Okay, so first thing that pops out to me, and it's super recent, is this hush money case from January 2025. And the outcome kind of blew my mind.
Right.
You've got 34 criminal charges, a conviction, but then he gets what they call an unconditional discharge.
Yeah. That one was a head scratcher for a lot of folks.
What is going on there?
So, I mean, basically it all started with those payments to Stormy Daniels back in 2016, right? And the charges themselves were all about how those payments were hidden. Falsifying business records, that's what they got him on.
Wow.
But here's the thing. An unconditional discharge means the court said, yep, he's guilty, but no jail time, no fines.
What?
It's like you're convicted, but there's no real punishment.
Doesn't that feel like a slap on the wrist, though? I mean, 34 charges.
It's definitely something a lot of legal experts have been debating. Does it make the charges seem less serious? Is there something else going on here?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to wrap your head around.
Well, I think it kind of points to this bigger pattern you see with Trump, right?
Yeah.
His personal life, his business dealings, and then his political career. They're all kind of tangled up.
They are all very intertwined, aren't they?
Yeah, and this hush money case, even with this light sentence, I think it really highlights that.
Okay, so before we dig into specific cases, can you kind of like zoom out for a second?
Mm-hmm.
Give us like a bird's eye view.
Sure.
I mean, you've got criminal cases, civil stuff, even those two impeachments. Like, how do we even begin to categorize all this?
It is a lot to process, you're right. One way to think about it is to separate his business dealings from things that happened during his political career.
Okay, that makes sense.
So on the business side, you have cases like that Trump University fraud case, right?
Yeah, and that one ended with a pretty big settlement, didn't it?
It did. It did. And then there's the New York Attorney General's civil fraud lawsuit, which...
Oh, yeah, that was a whole other can of worms.
It really was. It was basically alleging that Trump and his company were playing fast and loose with their finances.
So those fall under the business umbrella you're talking about.
Exactly.
Right.
And then on the political side, you've got those really big criminal cases, like the classified documents case where they accused him of mishandling sensitive information after he left office.
At Mar-a-Lago.
That's the one, yeah. And then you've got the federal election obstruction case, which was all about whether he tried to overturn the 2020 election.
Oh, right. And then, wait, there's that one in Georgia, too. Right. About the election.
Exactly, the Georgia election racketeering case. That one's interesting because it uses the term racketeering, which,
Sounds like something out of a mob movie.
Yeah, I know, right?
Look.
But essentially it means engaging in illegal activity as part of an organization. So,
Whoa, so they're not just saying he acted alone.
right, they're suggesting there might have been a whole organized effort to interfere with the election.
Okay, so that definitely ups the ante.
It really does, yeah. And then, of course, you have the two impeachments.
Right, once in 2019 and then again in 2021.
And both times he was acquitted by the Senate.
Yeah, he was. But, I mean, even so, he's the only president in history to be impeached twice.
It's a pretty remarkable record.
It is. It's just, okay, so two impeachments, tons of lawsuits, and now this hush money conviction. How does all this even happen?
I mean, it's definitely a lot to absorb.
It is.
But you mentioned a pattern earlier, and I think that's key here.
Okay, yeah. What pattern keeps repeating across all these cases?
Well, one thing that stands out is Trump's consistent denial of any wrongdoing. I mean, he's built a career on never backing down. So it's not surprising that his legal strategy is basically to just go on the offensive no matter what he's accused of.
So attack, attack, attack.
Pretty much. We also see a lot of delay tactics, filing tons of motions and appeals to drag things out as long as possible.
So it's not just about the legal arguments themselves. It's also about controlling how the public sees it all.
You got it. He's incredibly skilled at using the media to his advantage. Portraying himself as a victim of political persecution, rallying his supporters.
So even when he's convicted or there's a settlement, he still manages to come across as innocent.
Exactly. He very rarely, if ever, actually admits he's done anything wrong, even with settlements. It's always presented as, we just wanted to avoid more legal costs, not an admission of guilt.
So then what does that say about accountability?
Right. That's the big question that keeps coming up again and again in all these cases.
That's a really good point. But before we dive into that, there are two specific cases I really want to unpack.
Okay, let's do it.
The E. Jean Carroll case and the classified documents case. I
Mhm.
think those two really highlight some of the key things we've been talking about.
I agree. They're both fascinating and kind of exemplify some of the big issues at play here.
So E. Jean Carroll, just to refresh everyone's memory, what exactly happened there?
Okay, so E. Jean Carroll is a writer who accused Trump of sexually assaulting her and also of defaming her. And this was a civil case, important to note, not criminal.
Right, right.
And in the end, the jury sided with Carroll, finding Trump liable for both the sexual abuse and the defamation. And she was awarded $5 million in damages.
Wow, okay. So this case, and then all those other accusations of sexual misconduct against Trump, they bring up this big question.
Yeah.
Why have none of them led to criminal charges?
Well, there are a few reasons for that. First off, many of these accusations, they fall outside the statute of limitations, meaning too much time has passed to actually press charges. So it's literally too late.
Right. And then secondly, proving sexual misconduct in court. It's notoriously difficult.
I can imagine.
You need really strong evidence, and a lot of times it comes down to he said, she said,
Right.
which makes it really tough to get a conviction.
So while we need to take every accusation seriously, we also have to remember that the legal system has its limits.
Absolutely.
And I'm assuming Trump denied all those accusations too, right?
Oh, absolutely. He's denied any wrongdoing, of course. He says it's all politically motivated, just attacks meant to ruin his reputation. Okay, so we've got the Carroll case, a civil case, big financial judgment against Trump, but no criminal charges.
Yeah.
So let's switch gears to the classified documents case, which went in a very different direction.
Yeah.
Remind us, what was the core issue there?
So this one was a criminal case.
Hmm.
And the accusation was that Trump mishandled classified documents when he left office.
Right. They said he took boxes of these documents to Mar-a-Lago and wouldn't give them back.
That's it. The government was really concerned, and this case had the potential to really hurt him. But then it got dismissed.
Wait, dismissed? What happened? This was huge news.
It was. But the Supreme Court stepped in and ruled that former presidents have immunity from prosecution for actions they took while in office.
Seriously.
Yeah, and that ruling basically, well, it gutted the case against Trump.
So even though the accusations were pretty serious, mishandling classified information and all, it just goes away because he used to be president.
It was a really controversial decision. Some people argued that it set a dangerous precedent, basically giving former presidents a get-out-of-jail-free card for anything they did while in office.
Yeah, that does seem like a pretty big legal loophole. So much to unpack there. We've only just touched on a couple of cases, and we haven't even gotten to those civil lawsuits yet.
I know, right? We've still got a lot to cover, like that New York Attorney General's fraud case.
Yeah.
That one really dives deep into his business practices. It's a whole other layer of this whole legal maze.
Sounds like it. All right, we are going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll delve into that case and explore just how deep this legal rabbit hole goes. All right, so that New York Attorney General's fraud case, this one seems particularly interesting. What's so important about this one?
Well, I think it really gets to the heart of how Trump ran his businesses. The New York AG basically accused him and his company, the Trump Organization, of this pattern of inflating their assets.
Inflating.
Yeah, like basically lying about how much their properties were worth to get loans and tax breaks.
Oh, so like kind of cooking the books to make themselves look richer.
Exactly. And it's a huge civil lawsuit. I mean, massive. And in the end, there were some pretty serious consequences.
Serious how? Was it just another settlement with a huge dollar amount attached?
It went further than that, actually. The court put restrictions on how the Trump Organization can actually do business.
Wow, so they couldn't just go back to business as usual.
Yeah. Nope. They were limited in the kind of deals they could make. They had to get court approval for certain transactions. They even had to have an independent monitor, like a watchdog, overseeing their finances.
So real limitations then.
Yeah.
That's got a sting for a guy like Trump who, prides himself on being this great businessman.
You think so, right?
Did he just take it or did he fight back?
Oh, he fought back. Of course, he denied any wrongdoing, called the whole thing a witch hunt, politically motivated, all that. But the court wasn't buying it.
Huh.
And I think what's interesting here is that this case, even though it was civil, not criminal, it really started to chip away at that image he's always had of being this brilliant businessman.
Right. It's like these legal battles, even when they don't land him in jail, they still have an impact.
They do, and it all circles back to that question of accountability.
Accountability.
Yeah, the hush money case, the Carroll case, this one with the New York AG, even those impeachments. And yeah, even the classified documents case getting dismissed. All these accusations, the attention they bring, they all have consequences.
So it's bigger than just winning or losing in court.
Exactly. It's about how these battles affect his reputation, his business dealings, and his ability to function in the political arena.
So it all ties together.
It does. And that's something, for anyone trying to understand where Trump's headed next, you got to keep that big picture in mind.
Yeah, because it is really complex. So we've got this web of legal stuff, a pattern of denial and delay tactics, and then this question of accountability. But he got reelected.
Right.
How does that even make sense? People voted for him despite all of this.
Get the million-dollar question, right? I think part of the answer lies in how effective his strategy has been.
His strategy?
Yeah, constantly saying the legal process is rigged, that he's the victim. It creates this us versus them mentality, and I think he's convinced a lot of voters that these cases are just attacks, nothing more.
So he's basically sowing seeds of doubt, making people question whether they can trust the system.
Right. And he portrays himself as the guy fighting against that corrupt system.
The outsider, the rebel, the one who's not afraid to shake things up.
Exactly. And that message, it resonates with people who are disillusioned with politics, who feel like the system has failed them. And they're willing to overlook or even embrace all the legal stuff because they see it as proof that he's on their side fighting for them.
So it's like this weird dynamic. The legal battles, the political strategy, how the public sees it all. It's like a tangled mess.
It really is. And it seems to be a big part of how he's managed to keep his base so loyal despite all the controversy.
It's definitely a puzzle. Okay, so we've got this massive legal landscape, his patterns, his strategies. Looking forward, though, do you think these legal problems could create challenges for him during his presidency? Or maybe even opportunities? I mean, could it affect his ability to govern?
That's a tough one to answer. I mean, on the one hand, it's easy to see how these legal battles could be a distraction, right? They could suck up a lot of his time, his energy, and that could make it harder for him to focus on governing.
It's hard enough being president without having all these legal headaches.
Right. But on the other hand, he might find a way to use these battles to his advantage. Feed that narrative that he's being persecuted, rally his base even more. It's risky, but it's a strategy that's worked for him before.
It's like a gamble.
It is. Could backfire, could pay off big time. It's hard to say.
So we're back to that pattern. Deny, attack, play the victim.
Pretty much. It's what he does. It's defined his whole approach to legal stuff, and I don't see that changing now. Whether it'll help him or hurt him in the long run, well, that's anyone's guess.
It's definitely a lot to think about. There's one more thing, though, something our sources mention, but it's not totally clear what it means. It's about his connections to certain people. Jeffrey Epstein and Sean Diddy Combs.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's interesting. The information we have on those connections is pretty limited. It seems like Trump and Epstein knew each other, ran in the same circles back in the 90s and early 2000s, the New York scene.
So more of a social thing than anything super close.
That's what it looks like, yeah. And with Sean Combs, it's kind of similar. They've been seen together at events, but there's nothing public that suggests they have a deep personal or business relationship.
So why do you think the sources even bring these guys up? Is it just because they're controversial themselves, or is there more to it?
Well, I think it shows how much people want to scrutinize every part of Trump's life, every relationship, every connection. I mean, he's a high-profile figure, always surrounded by controversy. So people are naturally curious about who he hangs out with and whether those connections matter, Could they affect his decisions or actions?
It's like everyone's trying to solve the puzzle of Donald Trump. And these connections, even if they seem small, they become pieces of that puzzle.
Yeah, exactly. But here's the thing, and this is where critical thinking is so important. We can't jump to conclusions. Just because he knows someone controversial doesn't mean he's guilty of anything.
Guilt by association. Right. We have to be careful about that.
We do. Look at the facts, weigh the evidence, and make up your own mind.
Good advice. Okay, so back to the hush money case for a sec. Legal experts seemed surprised by the outcome. They thought the sentence would be harsher. Can you break that down for us a bit?
Sure. Remember, he was found guilty on all 34 counts. That's a big deal. Most legal experts figured there would be some kind of punishment beyond just the conviction itself. But then he gained that unconditional discharge. No real consequences. A lot of people were scratching their heads.
So why such a light sentence? Was it just the judge being lenient, or is there something else we're missing?
It's tough to say for sure what was going through the judge's mind. Sentencing guidelines are complicated. You have to consider the type of crime the defendant's past, whether they're likely to reoffend. It's a lot to balance.
So even though he was convicted, the judge maybe took into account his age, no prior criminal record, that kind of stuff.
It's possible, yeah. But it also made people wonder if his wealth and status had anything to do with it.
Yeah, it's hard not to think about that, especially with this idea that the rich and powerful play by different rules.
Right. And regardless of the judge's reasons, it definitely fed into that whole perception of a two-tiered justice system. One for the elites, one for everyone else.
And that's not a good look for the legal system.
No, it erodes trust, for sure. And it feels like that lack of trust, that erosion of faith in institutions, it's a theme that keeps coming up with Trump.
It does, doesn't it?
His attacks on judges, on prosecutors, on the legal process itself, it all contributes to this climate of suspicion and cynicism.
And it goes beyond the legal system, right? It feels like that cynicism is everywhere in politics now.
You're right, and that's the dangerous part. When we lose faith in our institutions, when we start questioning the very foundations of democracy, it can lead to division and instability.
Yeah, it's a pretty bleak thought, but it also shows how important it is to think critically and stay engaged.
Absolutely.
We can't just give in to despair or blindly believe everything we hear. We have to stay informed, question what we're told, and have those difficult conversations with each other.
I agree. It's about being an active participant in democracy, not just watching it all happen.
Well said. So you were talking earlier about how Trump might use these legal battles to his advantage during his presidency. Can you explain that a bit more? What kind of tactics might he use?
Sure. One tactic he's used a lot is what I call flooding the zone. It's basically bombarding the media and the public with so much information, so many accusations and denials, that it's hard to figure out what's true and what's not.
So create chaos and confusion, make it so overwhelming that people just tune out.
Right. And then, in all that chaos, he can control the story. He pushes his version of events, discredits his opponents.
And social media is like the perfect tool for that, right?
Oh, absolutely. He's a master at using social media. He can go around the traditional media outlets, speak directly to his supporters.
And even if what he's saying contradicts the facts or what's happening in the courts,
Yeah.
he can still shape the narrative.
That's the power of social media. It's great for spreading information, but it's also great for spreading misinformation and propaganda.
Two sides of the same coin.
It is. It can be used for good or bad. And with someone like Trump, who's so good at communication, so good at putting on a show, it can be a really powerful weapon.
Definitely something to be wary of. It all comes back to that critical thinking and being smart about what we consume online.
Couldn't agree more. With so much information flying around these days, it's more important than ever to be thoughtful about what we believe.
Okay, let's zoom out again and think about the bigger picture. How do you think all this legal stuff might affect not just his presidency, but the country as a whole? Are there any ripple effects we should be watching for?
Well, one potential consequence is that it could make political polarization even worse. His legal battles have become this flashpoint for division. His supporters see it as a political witch hunt, while his opponents see it as proof that he shouldn't be in office.
So these legal battles are actually adding fuel to the fire of political division. Makes it even harder to find common ground.
Exactly. And that's a huge problem for any democracy. When we can't even agree on basic facts or have a civil conversation, it becomes impossible to govern effectively, to solve problems together.
It's like we're stuck in this endless loop of outrage and division, and it's hard to see a way out.
I know it can feel that way, but it's important to remember that we, as citizens, have the power to change things. It starts with each of us.
How do you mean?
It's about making a conscious choice to have respectful conversations, to get information from a variety of sources, and to hold our leaders accountable.
So it's about taking action, being engaged, not just sitting back and complaining.
Exactly. We're not just bystanders. We have a voice. We can make a difference.
I like that. A message of hope and empowerment.
That's what we need right now. Informed engagement, critical thinking, and a commitment to the principles that make democracy work.
Well said. Now, before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, I want to circle back to Trump's legal strategy. You talked about denial, delay, and counterattack being his main approaches. Could you elaborate on that a little more? What specific tactics does he use?
Sure. One of his favorites is just flat-out denial. No matter what the evidence shows, he'll deny any wrongdoing. Say the accusations are fake, made up, politically motivated.
Deny, deny, deny.
Exactly. And you know what? It works, at least with his base.
It does. Why do you think that is?
Well, by always playing the victim, he taps into this feeling that a lot of his supporters have, this sense that he's being unfairly targeted by the establishment.
So it's not just denying the accusations. It's about creating this image of being the underdog, the outsider, fighting a corrupt system.
Exactly. And that really resonates with his base, who see him as a fighter who doesn't back down.
Okay, so denial is one tactic.
Yeah.
What about the delay part? How does he manage to drag things out for so long?
He's really good at using legal procedures to stall things. He'll file tons of motions, appeals, countersuits, and a lot of times they seem pretty pointless, just meant to waste time.
So bury the legal process in paperwork and delay.
Exactly. And it can be really effective. It can take years for cases to work their way through the courts. And in the meantime, he can keep doing what he wants, controlling the narrative.
Delay, delay, delay. Another classic tactic.
Right. And then, of course, there's the counterattack. If you accuse him of something, he's not just going to sit there and take it. He's going to come after you, and he's not afraid to get personal.
So it's not just defending himself. It's about going on the offensive, trying to discredit whoever is accusing him.
Exactly. He'll call people liars, cheats, say they're part of a conspiracy against him. It's scorched earth.
Yeah, no kidding. And as aggressive as it is, it seems to work, at least in terms of getting his base fired up and creating a sense of chaos.
It does. It's been a hallmark of his career in business and politics.
So denial, delay, counterattack, those are his go-to moves, and they've worked pretty well for him so far.
They have. But whether they'll keep working during his presidency, who knows? The stakes are higher now, and things are more complicated.
It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. One last question before we move on. Given all these legal battles, the patterns, the strategies, what do you think it all says about Donald Trump as a person, as a leader?
That's a great question. And it's not an easy one to answer. I think what we can see from all this is that he has this unwavering belief that he's always right, no matter what. He really seems to think he's the victim, that he's above the rules.
So like a sense of infallibility.
Exactly. And that can be a strength, you know? It can make him determined, resilient. But it can also make him blind to his own weaknesses, make him unwilling to compromise or admit when he's wrong.
It's a strange combination. And I think it will definitely shape his presidency and how history remembers him.
Absolutely. These legal battles, they're more than just court cases. They reveal something about who he is, what he values, how he views power.
It's a lot to process.
Yeah.
And it's something we all need to be thinking about as we move into this next chapter.
We do. It's a time for critical thinking, for being informed, for holding our leaders accountable.
Well said. Okay, I think it's time to shift gears and look at the broader political landscape. How do you think these legal battles might impact not just Trump's presidency, but the country as a whole?
Yeah, it's like, how do you even untangle it all? But I feel like we've made some headway at least.
We have. We've definitely laid some groundwork, help folks understand the major players, the patterns we see popping up and what all this might mean, going forward. And for me, I think the big takeaway is that you can't separate the legal stuff from his political life. It's all connected.
Yeah, it really is. It's not just about what's happening in courtrooms. It's about how the public sees it, how the media covers it, and how it all feeds into this battle for power.
It's almost like a cycle. The legal battles affect the political landscape, and the political landscape affects the legal battles.
Exactly, yeah. And that makes it so much harder to figure out how it's all going to shake out, now that he's president again.
I mean, there are just so many possibilities.
There really are. It's almost like hold your breath and see what happens.
Yeah, it's kind of a nail biter, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's also a reminder that we're not just, sitting on the sidelines watching this play out. We all have a role to play, in a way.
I completely agree. It's more important than ever to be informed, to think critically about everything we see and hear.
And to hold our leaders accountable. Okay, so I think we've covered a lot of ground here. We've explored the cases, the patterns, the strategies. It's been a wild ride, that's for sure. But hopefully everyone listening has a better grasp of Trump's legal world and what it could mean for the next 4 years.
Yeah, it's complicated stuff, but I think we've shed some light on it.
I think so too. As always, we encourage everyone to keep digging, keep learning, and most importantly, form your own opinions.
Don't just take our word for it.
Exactly. Do your own research, look at things from different angles.
The truth is out there, but sometimes you got to work a little to find it.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. And until next time, keep those brains buzzing.